I got to go and get my thongs from the car. Can you open the car up? Which I've said before, that's an actual story where I left my flip-flop in the car of a mate's car and asked him if he could give me the keys to his car so I can get my thongs out of his car. That was a very interesting moment there, just for a second, when he looked at me puzzled, and then I took a second and went, I mean flip-flop. I do not have underwear that is rides up my ass in the back of your car.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the 30th episode of the Underrated Podcast, the podcast where we talk to you about sports. I actually called it.
Maybe you didn't even get a second in.
Off the bat.
Didn't even get a second in. Hey, Bobby, I'm just on the phone at the moment. Can I give you a cuddle and then come and give you a good kiss later? Wave and say goodbye. All right, I'll come out and find you when I'm done, okay?
That's awesome.
I want to be with Harry, okay?
Okay. I'll be down there. I'll come and say hi. Let's try that.
So mid-intro again, 30th episode of the Underrated Podcast, where we talk to you about sports and rant about a bunch of stuff that we think should be ranted about. Today we have a special guest. Well, we had a special guest just now, but she left the room for a little bit. But now we have our actual guest. He's the number one 10-pin bowler in the world, the number one bowler in the world, and he's the all-time leader in PBA major titles with 13. Jason Belmonte, thank you so much for coming on.
How you going, boys? Thanks for having me on your show. Looking forward to it.
So, it's obviously a pretty weird time. You know, you're not where you usually are in the bowling lanes. You're at home. Everybody's at home. So how are you kind of staying with it? How are you doing throughout this time?
You know, I'll tell you something, mate, that I didn't realize. I mean, I love the game of bowling. Okay? I love it. It's in my blood. It's actually, I feel like it's a part of my DNA now. But the one thing I wasn't really prepared for was how much I would really miss it. I mean, really miss it when I couldn't compete due to, no fault of anyone's really, just the way that this has all gone down. So I'm itching to get back to the lanes and bowl against my competitors and try and win more major championships. I don't know when that's going to be, and I think that's probably the hardest part to wrap my head around. It's just, my schedule is usually so well planned and thought out. I have all of my tournaments set out. I have all of my flights booked. I know where I'm going, when I'm going, and it just gives you that opportunity to kind of, prepare. Or if I'm home, it gives me that time where I can be like, right, I leave in 2 or 3 weeks. This is what I need to get done here at home, and these are the things I want to do while I'm home. So it even makes you more prepared while you're home. Now, who knows, right? So I've probably been a little crankier than usual here at the house. I'm sure my wife and kids aren't appreciating it, but at the end of the day, one thing that I do try to do during the pandemic, not that I've ever said that before, but I try to spend as much time with my family because I do travel a lot. So that extra time is something that I cherish and that I'm going to really appreciate.
And
go ahead,
yeah.
I was about to say, I feel like a lot of people who do travel and tour and do all the stuff that you do are currently kind of wishing they'd get back out there, but also kind of are cherishing this time due to the fact that, once again, they're on the road a lot. They're doing whatever they do. Oh,
absolutely. I'm not saying I'm the only one. There are now millions, tens of millions of people around the world who travel for a living, who are now quarantined, isolating, and it's just an adjustment period. So like I said, I think the hardest for everyone is just we don't know when we're going back to, and I say normal, but I guess it will be a new normal. And whenever that date finally comes, I think you'll see a lot of relief from a lot of the people, like, oh, finally, I can start to organize my life in the future, knowing what I can and can't do.
And we saw in an interview on your website, actually, you have like a little preview of what you've done throughout your career. and there was one where it one of your championships. I don't know which tournament it was, but it was broadcasted at one of your kids' schools. And in the interview afterwards, you said you really miss them and you're hoping that you get back home. So now is that moment to kind of cherish the time with your family?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that was the 2019 World Championship, and that was a really special moment in my career. That was the tournament that I won that had me as the all-time leader in major championships. And I didn't know what was happening, but the producers at Fox and my family, my wife, they were communicating. And with the school that my children go to, they'd set up a big screen, and they actually created a link between the Fox broadcasters in Detroit and my children's school here in this small little town of Orange. So when I won and Kimberly Pressler, who is the sideline reporter, she said, "Hey, we've got someone really special on the big screen." And I saw that image of my children and all of their school friends, the entire school, which it's only a little school. So, they all fit into one big classroom. But when that final strike went down and everyone just lit up, it was a pretty amazing moment.
And you said before that how much you do miss not only the family but also the game of bowling. But how are you staying at the same physique? Do you have maybe home bowling lanes, or what kind of workouts are you doing?
No. Well, I'm really lucky again, and I'm not sure how familiar with my life story you are, but my mum and my dad, they built a bowling center when I was born. So I have a 16-lane bowling center, which in my town, everything is 5 minutes away. It's if you get more than like 3 cars in front of you at a traffic light, you're screaming at the traffic. It's terrible today. What is going on? So it's a little place, and there's 16 lanes there. So even though the bowling centers are closed down due to the pandemic, I still have a key to get into the place, and I can go and train at night. But the hardest part is I guess it's as much like hockey or football or any other sport. It's that game practice. It's that, when your adrenaline is really pumping, that's the part that I miss. I actually really miss stepping up on the lanes, cameras all over you, crowd on top of you, the bright lights, knowing that everything that I'm about to do is about to be watched by potentially millions of people. I miss that feeling so much. Bowling here, practicing at night in a closed venue on my own, doesn't quite give me the thrill that I'm looking for.
Yeah, you don't kind of hear you don't kind of hear like the crowd reacting, or you don't hear the kind of announcers in the back if you do hear the announcers and that kind of stuff.
You just gave me an idea, Matt. I might actually put in my my headphones, right, and I'll find a track of like a stadium full of crowd noise, and I'll throw my headphones in, and I'll train with the ambient noises of screaming fans to give me that rush.
I think
just have a video and then just cut out all your bowling park. Just see the fans cheering.
Yeah, I'll cut out all the commentary as well. So as I'm throwing strikes, the commentator will be like, "And Belmonte with another strike."
I think I recently just read, I forget where I read it, but I think it's like some Chinese sports league that's doing exactly that, where they developed an app. So that's why when you're watching the game on your TV, you press a button on the app and it pipes in that noise to the players of like cheering or whatever.
I got to try it out. I think it'd be fun. I mean, what's the worst that happens?
Yeah.
It doesn't work. I take my headphones out and I go back to being by myself.
So now that we've kind of you've seen all your recent championships, and obviously bowling was a big part of your life in your at a young age. Your parents built it when you were 18 months old, and that's when you first picked up a bowling ball. Is that where you're how much does it mean to you in your young age? How much did bowling mean to you in your young age? And that's why you claim you bowl with 2 hands. And did it affect your childhood negatively, positively? How did it affect your childhood?
Yeah, well, my parents built the bowl when I was born, 2 weeks after I was born. When I turned 18 months, I wanted to bowl by myself. So I didn't want help from my parents. And that's where, you know, as an 18-month-old child, you're picking the bowling ball up using two hands. It's just too heavy for a little kid to bowl with a traditional style. Now, my parents had never bowled a ball in their life prior to opening the bowling center. They knew nothing about the game from a professional perspective. They were not coaches, nothing like that. So basically, when I was bowling the way that I was bowling, my parents didn't stop me because they didn't really care how I was doing it. And it was the only way that I could bowl. So as you grow and you realize that this is just a very natural way for me to play, it just felt right. Well, I wasn't going to change, but that didn't necessarily stop a lot of other people from trying to convince you to change. So bowling is it's a very old game. You know, we're talking about, like, historically, the very first recorded bowling pins and ball was actually in Egyptian times, you know, a few thousand years ago. Like, that's how far back the concept of knocking over things with a ball goes. So there's a lot of history in the actual game itself. Sorry, you're about to say something?
Yeah, I was gonna say I've one of my parents works at the museum where I think it was made by Brunswick, like the first automatic pin setter kind of thing. That's in where we live in Canada, and I've seen it. It's like, so basically how that kind of worked back then was you had like the same old pin setter, except it was kind of like a lever you'd pull and it would reset it.
Yeah.
And someone would have to, and one of the servants, because it's in a giant mansion, of course, would have to, as soon as the ball went in the gutter, they'd have to roll it back every time. So just imagine having someone, like, while you're bowling, just sit there and just fly it back.
Yeah, that's the first kind of like automated system. And then prior to that, it used to just be that servant, as you described them, or it could be a job that a young kid would get. His job for, you know, a couple of shillings, I don't know what that is in American terms, but, you know, for like a couple in Canadian terms, but he would work, and his job was to sit on a little ledge above the pins. The bowler would bowl, knock all the pins over. He would jump down off the ledge, move all the pins off, and when it was time to reset them, that was his gig, right? He'd jump back down and set them all back up. And there's a lot of, like, you know, there's a lot of stories, and you read a lot of them about these poor young kids who, you think about a bowling ball and how hard pins are and the way they fly around a little bit, you know, a lot of youngsters just getting massive bruises on their shins, you know, on their heads, because these pins are flying everywhere. So the invention of the automated machine, you know, changed the game of bowling. And I think obviously for the better. It sped the bowling process up and it made it a lot safer. But I kind of want to go back a little bit because I wanted to kind of share with you, you know, what it's like when you do something a little different and you kind of get, I mean, I want to say it in a polite term, but you kind of get steered towards a traditional path. And I don't know, I guess you guys are big hockey guys, right?
Yeah.
Canadian, young kids, got your logos on. Yeah, you're basically bleeding hockey every day. So, you know, in hockey, the way someone skates, the way someone, you know, controls the puck, there are uniqueness towards every player. Like everyone has that unique stylistic approach to it. And I don't know, for me, if you were to turn every hockey player into some textbook player, the game loses its charm. It loses its sense of uniqueness. The greatest players don't separate themselves nearly as much as they could if everyone played similarly. And I kind of feel like that's the same thing with bowling. So for a really long time, there was like some, you know, old age rules. Like, this is how you are supposed to bowl. You take 4 steps, you put your 2 fingers and your thumb in the ball, you keep your shoulders square, and you have a nice, simple release. And that's how the game was played. And a lot of people wanted to break the shackles of tradition but I just think it wasn't the right time. And then here I come along with some, parents who know nothing about the game of bowling, and it's a very, very different way. So I think there were a lot of hardships along the way, but it was always more about people expecting me to conform to the way that they play, the same way that they were taught. And whether it be in life, sport, or anything else, I almost feel like you have to look inwards and just be yourself. Like whatever feels right to you is what is the way that you need to go about your own business. Obviously you can't be hurting someone else. If that feels good for you, you probably need to see somebody professionally about that. But that's my internal belief. So yeah, like you boys, it's a little unconventional here, little Canadian duo, ranting. It's ranting about sport. I think if you were to conform to what, kids your age should be doing, you wouldn't be where you are right now,
Yeah, we'd be talking to the #1 bowler in the world right now, which is as cool as it sounds for everybody on the other side of the screen.
So kind of going back along the path of your career as well. So once you won Rookie of the Year in your first PBA tour, was that kind of when you felt your career take off, or was there another point?
No, so I had a slightly different career path. Because I live here in Australia, I live in the middle of nowhere. I kind of taken my career in little steps. So it started here in Orange. Then there's a couple of bowling centers within a few hours drive of me. So I would compete in those ones. And then when I was doing really well there, I would go to like Sydney and play in the big metropolitan cities of Australia, Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane. And then you look at the map and you say, well, what's the next spot, right? And the next spot was the Asian tour, followed by the European tour. And then the last stop is the American tour, it's the PBA tour. That's the Everest of bowling. So I had created, through the success that I had globally, a little recognition, not to mention I bowl differently, right? So there was a lot of talk about an Australian two-handed player who was winning on these tours around the world. So when I approached the US, I don't know if it was necessarily like the moment that my career went boom. I think I had a very solid career prior to the American tour. But what it did do is I think it catapulted the way that I throw the bowling ball. It legitimized my technique. It was still kind of, a little gimmicky. It was unconventional, and I think a lot of people didn't take it very seriously. So when I started to have more success on the PBA tour in the US, then I think I became a much more recognizable figure in the sport. But most of the young guys that are on tour now, they'll come straight out of high school and go, I want to go on tour. So, I went, my very first year on the pro tour was when I was 26, I think. That was my rookie year when I was 26. Now we've got, 17, 18-year-olds in their rookie year. If you're now 23 or older and it's your rookie year, it's deemed a very late start in our game. So to get out there when I was 26, I was well behind, the traditional entrance of timing. But I seem to have adjusted, I think, quickly and done really well.
Yeah. So speaking of adjusting quickly, so from the years 2004 to 2011, you competed in the AMF World Cup, winning 1 out of the 3 appearances. And you say that the AMF Championship is one of your most prized possessions. How did you feel winning it the first time?
Yeah, the World Cup is so it's a very unique format for the World Cup. Basically, every country has its own preliminary rounds to decide who will go and represent Australia. So through those years, I was traveling globally and playing in a lot of different tournaments. And sometimes the qualifier for the World Cup would clash with a European event or an Asian zone event. And when you're bowling for a living, the World Cup has no financial credit for it. There's the bragging rights of being a World Cup champion. There's the pride in wearing your national colors. But there was no financial check at the end of it. So when you're bowling for a living, you're looking for those checks. You're looking to pay your bills. You're looking to grow, your bank account. So on the occasions when it clashed, I would miss out on potentially representing Australia. So on 3 occasions, I had made a decision that, listen, I'm going to attempt to win my qualifier first. And then if I do that, I will give it everything I got to win the World Cup. And my goal was to do that as quickly as possible. Australia had never won a World Cup before in the men's division. So I wanted to win that desperately for my country and for myself. So heading to Johannesburg, I had one really special thing happen. My father, who never comes to watch me play because he's still working at the bowling center. He's still really busy. He's a very dedicated business guy. So he decided that he wanted to come and caddy for me at the World Cup, and to have my dad there, to be able to share the win with him. I'll never forget when I threw the last strike to win the World Cup. The place is packed, and I can still hear his very defined cheer. He has a very defined voice, and I can hear it to this day. And it was a really special moment to be able to fly home with him, both holding the trophy. Was a really, really amazing thing to happen, and I don't take that lightly. So I don't know if I'll ever compete again for Australia at the World Cup. Now that I've won it, I kind of want to move on and let the other Aussies coming through a crack at it.
And then obviously you said you're going to retire from the World Cup. And then once 2012 rolled along, so the year after you won it, you received Player of the Year award. And then the next year, and then the next year again. So you're 3 years straight. And then was that kind of your goal after winning the World Cup, to be Player of the Year for what would end up to be 3 years straight?
Yeah, I think at that point in my career, I had already had that conversation, with myself. We all have a conversation with ourselves at some point, and it usually goes a little something like, what do you want to do? Like, how far do you want to go? What's the goal here? What's the end game? And I had that conversation. And for me, the end game was to be the best in the world, but not just for a specific event like a World Cup, but to be considered by the entire industry as the best player, no matter what day it is, no matter where we are in the world, that if I'm there, I'm the best. And that was the drive within me to get to that level. The first step in attaining any kind of recognition as that status is you need to be the Player of the Year on the PBA Tour. Like I said, it's the Everest. It's where the best players in the world are. So if you're able to become the Player of the Year on the PBA Tour, you're certainly setting yourself up for the idea that you're the best player in the world. Once I won the first one, it was obviously dream come true. But I'll never forget when I walked off the podium after collecting my award. We had a tournament the very next day to start. And I said, we're going to start from scratch. You may have a trophy. You may be named the Player of the Year. But right now, you're starting as if you're the worst player out here. And you're going to prove yourself again to be the best. And to me, I think that's what has always separated the good from the greats, is the greats seem to constantly never give in to the fact that they're great. They're constantly pushing themselves, working on something to become even greater. And I've seen enough athletes. I've been fortunate enough to have a lot of conversations with enough athletes to teach me that lesson. So when that next tournament rolled around, my goal was to win that one. Like, come off that Player of the Year award and win it. And I did. And that to me was one of the most significant moments. It was basically also a message to my other competitors that, hey, I want to be so good. And now that I have been given these awards, I'm not stopping. I want all of them. I want them all. I want them forever. Well, until I die. So that to me was one of the goals that I had was to push yourself beyond the limit that you just didn't think you were capable of when you were younger. I don't think anyone truly knows they're going to be the best in anything. They have a goal and a dream and a drive to get there. And I think that to me was, once I started to get closer to it, I'm like, okay, this is becoming more realistic. Like, you're not that far away. You're ranked, 10. Now you're ranked 7. Now you're ranked 4. Like, I was climbing the rankings. So it was like, you're getting closer. And now that I'm there, I want nothing more than to stay there for as long as I deem, and as long as I am considered to be a professional player until I retire.
Then now that we've kind of went through you, or throughout your career, now that we've went through, you have major titles, you have a World Cup, and then you have Player of the Year. But in 2017, which people could argue was your best year with 3 majors in 1 year, which is good enough for anybody who wasn't considered the number 1 bowler in the world, was that when you felt all your hard work previously had maybe paid off?
It's a good question. I don't think I ever looked at it like that at the time. When you're when you're in the middle of it all, you don't really have a chance to just pause, stop, and reflect on everything. You're keeping the momentum going. Your eyes are set forward. You win that championship, and like I said just 5 seconds ago, my goal isn't to look back and go, "Oh, look what I've won." It's, what am I winning next, right? What's the next goal? I think when I finish that mindset, when I retire and have a chance to truly take a step back, I'll probably be able to look at different parts of my career and single them out as saying, oh, that would be the moment I would say that, I solidified myself at the top, or this was the moment that I would say it all was worthwhile. I think right now I'm so focused on growing my legacy, on competing against my competitors to the best of my ability, that I'm not really looking backwards just yet. But when that day comes, send me a Zoom link and we'll talk about it.
Awesome.
So of course, more recently in 2019, you won Player of the Decade. Would you add that to your list of kind of your accomplishments?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, when you're the Player of the Year, you get an amazing rush. You're the best player in the world, voted and ranked amongst your peers. To be the Player of the Decade, you're talking about hundreds and hundreds of players that have come in and out within that decade, and to be named the greatest of a decade is, I don't know, it's mind blowing to me. Yeah, like, I guess the hardest part is this wasn't something that I was planning. Like I told you earlier, like, my career was like baby steps. Like, I didn't think I was going to reach a goal so far down the road, and then to just not even get to that spot, but to go well past it. This is all still quite new to me. So, when you get accolades like that, it makes you want to pinch yourself, or, I sometimes joke and tell my wife to slap me across the face to make sure that I'm actually awake and this is all really happening. And I mean that, because I don't take it for granted. I know how lucky I am, and I know how hard I've worked, but I know how lucky I am. This stuff doesn't happen to anyone, to very many people, I should say. So I guess that will go down as, one of the highlights in terms of like an accolade that I've won, because it's an incredible idea that I never thought I'd get to.
Nice. Is there still kind of something or another trophy that you don't have that you kind of want to get at some point?
So if you had have asked me that question about 3 months ago, I would have told you it was the US Open. It was the only major championship I hadn't won. But then this season, I was really fortunate to win the US Open. So that tournament meant it kind of filled the hole in the Triple Crown, the Grand Slam, and the Super Slam. It was that one event that if, because I didn't own that one, I didn't have a Triple Crown. I didn't have a Grand Slam. I didn't have a Super Slam. So to have that one in my trophy cabinet, now it really kind of just went, all right, now what's next, right? That's the one you'd been focusing on for so long. Now you have it. And my idea is I want to win it again. If I win the US Open again, I'll be the only player in PBA history to have won the Super Slam, which is all the major championships that we have, to have won them all twice or more. So if I can do that, that will be outrageous. To even say that out loud, it's outrageous. So that's my goal.
That's awesome. And now for, you're known for, at least kids at our age who watch YouTube and maybe don't watch professional bowling, they know you for being on Dude Perfect twice. I mentioned for bowling trick shots 1 and 2, one in 2014 and one in 2019 or 2018, I believe. How did you meet, or how did they connect with you?
Right. So it was the other way around. I connected with them. So for about a year or so, maybe longer, closer to 2 years, I had this bold idea that I wanted to take a bowling ball into a public setting, set some pins up, and do something really crazy. And the more and more I thought about it, she thought about it. She thought about coming in, and then she's like, "Oh, you're still talking."
The creak and just no.
Spying on me in the background, kind of freaking me out a little bit. So I had this idea of taking bowling outside, and we have a skate park here in town, and I was just driving past it, and it just I went, oh, that would be dope to put bowling pins inside a skate park and try and do jumps with a bowling ball, do some outrageous stuff. So I went home, started drawing it all out, started planning some tricks that I had just using my own skate park. And the more and more I thought about it, the more and more I'm like, this idea is so cool. I need to collaborate with someone who can really make this idea go boom. So I was connected to a group called The Whistle, and The Whistle were also connected to Dude Perfect. So I called my partner at The Whistle, and I said, hey, listen, I've got this ridiculous idea. I think it's going to go boom. And I want to partner with the right group. And he's like, oh, dude, we have the perfect group for you. It's like, oh, really? It's like, yeah, coincidentally, they're called Dude Perfect. So I'm like, all right. So I get on the phone with the boys. I kind of, start pitching the idea. And before I could even really finish the pitch, they're like, love it. Let's get you over here. Let's do this. I'm like, all right, let's do it. And then Dude Perfect Bowling Trick Shot Part 1 was invented. And it was one of the most fun times I've ever had. First off, the boys of Dude Perfect are genuinely nice guys. So it helps when you work with good people and nice people. They were really accommodating to me. They looked after me and they really made me feel like I was one of them. So that was cool. And then they're not afraid to think big, which we have in common. So if you haven't seen it, for those watching, Dude Perfect Bowling Trick Shots Part 1 and 2, I think we're at nearly 100 million views for the first video and over 50 million views for the second. It's super, super cool stuff. They want to do Trick Shots Part 3, but they want to do it down under. They want to come to Oz the next time around. So it's going to be a little hard to do that during the pandemic, but I guess we'll just have to wait till that passes.
And then the first part, was that kind of the moment when they started to notice you? Was that when you felt you made an impact because somebody else maybe wanted your ideas or wanted you on their show, on their kind of channel?
I had worked with a few people before, collaborated. I'll tell you something, boys. One thing that surprises a lot of people, you would be amazed at how many people on the side like to bowl, famous actors and actresses, position of power people. Golf is obviously one of the sports that is well known to be a pastime for a lot of these athletes and business people, but bowling you would be really shocked. So when you're one of the best bowlers in the world, you do meet a lot of these very interesting people. So I had worked with a few people prior to, but I think Dude Perfect it was the very first time that I'd ever thought about working with bowling with another group and taking bowling to an extreme level. Like most of the work I'd always done prior was in bowling centers specifically and only. This time, we took the ball outside, and that was the kind of the epiphany moment. Was like, hold on, if I can do it with Dude Perfect, why can't I do it with someone else? Or why can't I incorporate bowling into another game that isn't inside a bowling center? So now that's my goal, is to continually create content on my YouTube channels or, Instagrams and other social media platforms that first off just gets people going, how did you do that? And then the second thing is to get it in front of people who aren't necessarily bowlers, right? You want to kind of grow the game. In order to do that, you've got to be in front of people that don't bowl.
And they're also very entertaining and very energetic. Like in both of the videos, they taught you different American celebration, which are similar to here in Canada. You don't hear "yee" too often, but it's interesting. They taught you, the crossbow. It's just a lot different from Americans to Australia. And was that like pretty crazy to see the stuff that they do in America that's different from Australia?
Oh, I think the biggest difference between the American culture and the Australian culture is, excuse me, is, we're just a way more laid back society. Of course, there are your individuals that are high strung, no matter where you are. But I just think as a collective group, we're so much more relaxed to say like, it's all right, mate. It's all good. Where they're more like, yo, you're in my face, bro. Like, that's how I kind of feel the biggest difference in the culture. The one thing I will say about the Dude Perfect boys is I think they kind of lean way more towards the laid back side of life than they do the in your face, like, get out of my face type mentality. So it was, and I had been competing in America. I've been familiar with the American, culture and lifestyle for, at that point, 4 or 5 years, maybe even a little more. So it wasn't unusual to come across, Texans. They're all from Texas. So, they're a unique bunch on their own. One thing I'm actually really disappointed about, and I'll tell you guys right now, I'm going to blame you two. I'm blaming you two, okay? I've never been to Canada. And you and I could have had this conversation in Canada at a later date. You could have invited me to Canada, and we could be doing this in the same room, and then I would have been able to get to Canada. So I'm actually blaming you guys for not getting to Canada. Yeah.
In the future, when we have a studio, when we have mics set up, we have like a whole kind of background. When there's not a pandemic, we'll definitely, if that's something, we'll invite you to Canada. We are
Brayden and Matt. I have an incredibly great memory. Okay, it is one of the few things I'm very lucky to have, and it is now etched into my memory forever. If I wake up one day and there are promos all over the like ESPN Canada or Fox Sports Canada, and it's the Underrated Podcast Live, and I haven't been called on the show, I will replay this moment in my head and come after you.
All right, so that is now etched in my brain to never forget Jason Belmonte when we're in Canada. Never forget it.
Yeah,
don't make me an enemy. Okay?
If there's one thing we will not do, it is we'll make you an enemy. Trust me, we'll have you on the show if we keep doing this in the future and we have like a whole studio and mics and that kind of stuff.
It's a deal. As my daughter would say, pinky promise, okay?
Pinky promise.
There we go.
100%, yeah. Here's a question I kind of wanted to ask. I feel like every journalist, when they meet Dude Perfect, asks, how long did it take to film a lot of the trick shots in the bowling trick shots?
Specifically the world's longest strike, the one that was 250 yards. Like I think the most recorded one was 200 feet. 250 yards is 750 feet, people. 750 feet. So that is almost 4 times the amount. So how long did that really take?
Or Or that would be 1.5 football field, I think.
Exactly.
Correctly, maybe, I don't know.
2.5. Yeah,
2.5.
250 yards
Yeah.
is, well, I mean, Australia, and I'm sure Canada's the same. You guys use the metric system, right?
Yeah.
You talk in
Oh,
meters,
yeah, we
but
use the
it's still a
system,
long,
yeah.
it's still a long bloody way, 225 meters. So it's 2 and a bit, footy field. So when we set the pins up, okay, so there were 2 ideas that I had, right? And I wanted to get them both done with Dude Perfect. The second idea, we ran out of time, and I ended up doing the fastest strike in the world with Eric Almirola, a NASCAR driver, and I threw a bowling ball out of a ridiculously high-speed NASCAR going around Charlotte Motor Speedway. But the other one was the world's longest strike, and since in our first video, we did the world's longest strike, and then a few other people had posted some other videos claiming, hey, we beat the record. We're now at, 100 yards or something like that, 120 yards. So I said to the boys, I'm like, hey, can we just end this debate once and for all? Can we just set these pins up so far away that no one is even going to try to just break it, let alone actually break it? So they're like, how far are you thinking? So I said, I don't know. Like, in my mind, I'm thinking 300 is a great number in bowling. Let's go 300 meters, right? So 330 yards. So we started looking for a place that had a straight line of nothing for 300 meters, and we couldn't find it. Now, in their office area, they have this parking lot at the back, and we measured it out, and the way that it all was like we could do 250 yards. Is that okay? And I'm like, yeah. It's still a long way. Like, when we set the pins up and then we walk back 250 yards, you can't see they're tiniest little things. So the other difficulty we had, other than the fact they were so far away, was this car park was heavily undulating, and there were, stones and rocks from trucks it was like a delivery area, right? So people who came to just deliver all their parcels would just drop everything in front of us. So we would be like, yo, we got to wait. The truck's, bringing a table and chairs set. So we'd have to wait for this semi truck to dump all its stuff and then leave again. And when he leaves, we're like, oh, he's knocked over that, that bin. We've got to move the bin now because it's in the way. So there's all these obstacles. And I just kept thinking, there's just no way we're going to make this shot. Like, it's just so undulating and there's crap everywhere. And I'm like, we'll try it. We'll see what happens. Now, the one thing I will give Dude Perfect credit for is when they come up with an idea and then they set it up, that's it. You don't change it. You don't quit. You stay there until you make it. So knowing this, and once they'd set it up, Tyler, who is the kind of the main guy in it all, he said, how are you feeling? And I said, I feel good. He goes, are you feeling like you're going to get this? And I said, yeah, I feel like I can get this. He's like, all right, we're doing it. We're here. He says he feels like he can do it. We're going to be here till he gets it. And it was 6 hours of straight, continuous bowling in a car park, going and chasing the ball. Every single time the ball looked like it was on target, something would happen. Like, it would hit a stone and deflect away, or there was like a point. There was one point in the part where it kind of starts to curve and then it needs to straighten up. But if it curves too much, it kind of fell off this little cliff, like hill. So there are so many times where it would like get to that point and we would all be going like, hold on. And then it would just fall off and go into the grass or whatever. We hit a few, I think we hit a few like card wheels and stuff like that, which if you hit a bowling ball into a car, it's no good. It's really bad. So when we finally saw the ball hit that path, make it through, kind of miss all the stones. It wasn't doing anything crazy. The pins are online, and then it hits them. Like the euphoric feeling of doing something for 6 hours straight in the middle of summer, by the way, in Dallas, which is just brutal heat. I don't know. I rank this as the craziest and most amazing things that happened in my life. I rank Dude Perfect, longest strike ever, as number 1. The birth of my 3 children, number 2, and getting married, number 3. Like, it's so good, right? It's up there. Now, my wife is just outside there, so when she walks in and she says, "What are you talking about?" You and I were all going to be like, "He was only joking," but between me and you, I'm like, shit. That moment was pretty euphoric feeling, to have that happen. So, I think that is one of the reasons what makes Dude Perfect so great, though, is they don't rely on any tricks in terms of, like, editing, or everything is what you see is real, and it's real because, well, I'm telling you, I was there, and there were plenty of opportunities to move the pins forward because the record at the time was only 100 meters or something like that. So we had a lot of room to still bring the pins closer to us and still be the record. But we had set already, it was going to be 250 yards, and that's the end of it.
That's awesome. And just to kind of end it off a little bit, we kind of thought we'd do something fun with you. It's actually, I have a page pulled up here, and you've done it with Dude Perfect twice, where they compare words with here to in Australia, which is interesting. So we don't know too many of the words, so maybe we could do like a little bit of quiz. So we give you a few words, you give us a few words, and we'll just see if we can get them right, if we can get them wrong. I don't know if all these are correct, but we'll see.
Oh crap!
Right.
So we've seen on Dude Perfect. If you guys haven't seen Dude Perfect, it's a lot different how to pronounce like sports brands. So Adidas in Canada and America is Adidas, and in Australia they don't pronounce it Adidas.
No,
how is it pronounced?
It's Adidas.
Same thing with Nike.
Adidas.
Yeah, Nike. But I've
heard Nike before.
Since Nike, and I say Nike now because it was only a couple of years ago, Nike released a statement globally saying, "Hey, this is how you pronounce our company name," and they specifically pronounced it Nike. So even though for my entire life I've been pronouncing it Nike, it has been wrong. But in Australia, we still pronounce it Nike.
Which is good because Matthew and I have a friend. His name is Thomas, and he lives here. He's American, and he pronounces it Nike, which is good because it's a good thing you said that now because now we can prove him wrong that it's not actually Nike, it's Nike.
Yeah, now we can prove him wrong. Yeah,
which is good.
Yeah.
So if he's watching
Tell him
this,
I read the statement. We've all been wrong. Now he can still choose to mispronounce it, and that's his choice. But he's mispronouncing it. So I'm trying to change Nike into my vocabulary.
which is cool. So do you have any for us that you say here that we might not know of? Because I have a website, it's BuzzFeed, so it might not be right. So I don't know really.
It's BuzzFeed, so it's BuzzFeed. You never know if BuzzFeed.
You never know if it's right.
One is actually a vegetable. Do you know what a capsicum is?
No, I don't think so.
Really, no,
yeah,
not
so
really.
This is really interesting, right? Because I figured when I first started traveling to the US, I figured, slang, right? Like what I would call that I know, like, okay, I don't know, like these are sunglasses, okay? That's the actual term for them, but we'll call them sunnies, right? They're just sunnies. But I know they're sunglasses. But the slang, I understand you guys may not have heard or be aware of it. Now, vegetables, like I didn't realize vegetables had different names around the world. I figured it's a vegetable. It's grown all over we would all have the same name for all the vegetables. But then I came to find out that peppers, green peppers, red peppers, yellow peppers, they are what we call capsicums. And every single time I'm ordering something, sandwich or from a deli. Yeah, throw some capsicums on there, some green capsicums. They always look at me like, you have literally just said a word that doesn't exist in the English language, capsicum. I'm like, no, dude, it exists. It's a vegetable. It's right there. I can see it. Put it on my sandwich.
They probably just sit there like, what is that?
Oh, absolutely. I look like an idiot.
And how awkward does that make the conversation now when they walk over again and give you it and they're like, here's something that we don't know how to pronounce. We don't really know what it is, but here's what we assume you're talking about.
Well, capsicum is also like, it's not necessarily the easiest word to like pronounce if you've only heard it once very quickly, right? So what they usually say is, what did you say? And I'll say capsicum. And they would be capsy what? You know, like, and they're trying to, I'm like, it's just the peppers. It's just the peppers. What I have noticed, all right, is especially my first few years of traveling to the US, I must have wasted, I don't know, how much time of my life explaining what I meant by saying words that didn't mean anything in the US. So you quickly learn what the actual word is where you are, and you try to save yourself the time of like explaining what you're saying. You just use their words. It's I'm getting a lot better at it, but I still occasionally would be like, say something new pops up and it's just a new word and everyone's like, what does that mean? I'm like, you've known me for 10 years on this pro tour. Seriously, you've never heard me say the word capsicum? You know, like, you've never heard me say that? And I go, no, man, that's a new one. I'm like, all right. So we're always finding out more and more new ones.
So I have one here. I read it. It's pretty interesting. So it's literally the number one on BuzzFeed. So a Barbie. So for us, it's a doll. It's like a very wide, very popular doll for anybody, really. And it's apparently not called that. It's not a doll in Australia.
Well, it depends in the context that you're using it. If my daughter came in, held the Barbie doll, and said, Daddy, look what I have, a Barbie, I would know that's a Barbie, right? But if you're talking about the three of us and, you know, we're going to go throw a few steak on the Barbie, right? All of a sudden now the context becomes a lot clearer. Hold on a sec. Throw a few steaks on the Barbie. He means barbecue, right? Like, I get that. And that's the one thing from America anyway. Maybe I don't know what it's like in Canada, but, you know, we don't have cookout. Everything that you cook on a barbecue that's outside is just, it's a Barbie. Are you coming over?
It's
to
a barbecue, yeah.
Are you going to the Barbie? You know, everything is, you know, I'm inviting you to my Barbie, right? And I can understand if you weren't in, if you didn't have the context of the conversation, it would be a little bit weird, you know, saying, hey, do you want to come over and have a good time, you know, at my Barbie? And people would be like, hey, you're a Barbie. You're having a good time with your doll? Like, what's going on over there in the Belmonte household? Like, you guys need to, like, relax over there a little bit. And I'm like, no. Thongs was another one, which is kind of a famous word. So thongs for us are
I see that one.
Yeah. So, and obviously thongs in the Northern Hemisphere, for a lot of the Northern Hemisphere. Well, no, maybe not hemisphere. Definitely in the American continent is a G-string, right, for us. Flip-flops, G-string, and thongs. So when I say to somebody, you know, I got to go and get my thongs from the car, can you open the car up? Which I've said before, that's an actual story, where I left my flip-flop in the car of a mate's car and asked him if he could give me the keys to his car so I can get my thongs out of his car. That was a very interesting moment there, just for a second, when he looked at me puzzled, and then I took a second and went, I mean flip-flops. I do not have underwear that rides up my ass in the back of your car.
I'm just expecting like a record scratch, and then just everyone just stops.
Yeah, you get yourself into a little bit of trouble, but in the end, it's all fun.
That's great.
I can't even process. Like, I can't process how embarrassing that would be. It's like, oh no, yeah, I just meant my flip flops. Yeah, sure you did. Sure you meant your flip flops. Like, they're just thinking.
One day I'm gonna say that, and I'm gonna like have a pair of like G-strings that I'm gonna just bring along. And when they all go, oh, he's going to go get his flip flops. He means flip flops. He said thongs, but he means flip flops. I'm actually going to come out with a pair of G-strings. Hey man, thanks. I found them. Appreciate it.
So we have one more before we kind of end it off, and it is it's interesting. Two things actually that we saw on Dude Perfect that people might not have seen, and it's traffic cones, like the little yellow cones you see, and cotton candy are two very different things in Australia. Very different.
Yeah, we call traffic cones over here witch's hat.
It's cool to hear that in person.
Let's be honest, they look like a witch's hat. Okay.
It does look like a witch's hat, actually. To be totally honest, it kind of does.
Oh, it absolutely does. And cotton candy is fairy floss.
I've heard that term before, fairy floss. I actually have heard that before.
Fairy is used a few different times. We have fairy bread, which is it's a slice of white bread with butter with well, we call them hundreds and thousands, but you guys call them sprinkle. So I think Canadians call them sprinkles, right there.
Yeah, like the little
sprinkles.
Like colorful. You call hundreds and thousands.
Yeah, sprinkles.
Yeah, they're called hundreds and thousands. That's what they're called. Because if you think about it logically, there is literally hundreds and thousands of these little things. So we have fairy bread, and then we have fairy light. And fairy light, if you can imagine a backdrop in Central Park where it's beautiful and you've got those white lights that hang in the trees, they're fairy
like Christmas lights almost, kind of. Yeah, like the Christmas light
lights are probably. Yeah, Christmas lights are more colorful, right?
Like I know what you mean. Yeah, I know what you mean. Like the white lights that wrap around trees.
White light that you wrap around a tree and it just doesn't do anything. It just sits there as a cute little fairy in the tree.
I feel like a lot of people we know, Braden, you have fairy lights. I feel like I've heard that term before, fairy lights.
Maybe not. You've seen them, but you didn't know they're called fairy lights.
Now you do.
I know. I've heard.
If you ever come to Oz, you guys will fit right in.
Lights before. I've heard the term fairy lights before, because if you Google fairy lights on like eBay or something, you'll see like a million listings for them.
It's still funny to hear fairy floss and witch's hat from you, like personally, and not just from a Dude Perfect video. It's still funny because I always laugh at it because it's just so different. Like you never expect a traffic cone to somebody going by in a car or maybe like a buggy, like a Volkswagen buggy, and go by and say, "Oh yeah, look at the witch's hat." And then you just look at you like you're crazy. But in Australia, you're not crazy. That's an actual thing.
Yeah, it's an actual thing. When you get told, on a sports ground, and you tell your kids, come on, we've got to go pick up all these witches' hats. I know it sounds very weird when you say it out aloud from a grown adult. It says witches' hats, but that's what we do.
All right, alrighty. Thank you so much for coming on. Bit of a longer episode, but it's a really fun talking to an Australian that says work weird.
No worries at all.